The villagers of Elderbrook had a saying when the white doves appear, death isn't far behind. They whispered it behind closed doors, taught it to their children, and clutched their protective amulets whenever they caught sight of the mysterious flock that followed Amara like a cloud of living snow. Amara's cottage stood at the edge of the village where the well-tended gardens faded into wild thistle and thorny undergrowth. It was a small dwelling of weathered stone and thick wooden beams, with herbs hanging from the rafters and smoke that curled from the chimney in shapes that some swore were too deliberate to be natural. The cottage had stood there for generations, but now it seemed different, darker, more foreboding ever since she had taken up residence 5 years ago. On this particular morning, Amara moved through her garden with practiced grace, her long black hair streaked with stark white strands that seemed to catch and hold the early morning light. The doves, as always, perched on nearby branches or strutted through the rows of medicinal herbs, their feathers impossibly clean despite the muddy earth beneath their feet. Some said the birds weren't real at all, but spirits trapped between worlds by her dark magic. Others claimed they were the souls of those she'd cursed, bound to her by powers too terrible to name. Amara heard their whispers, felt their stares, but continued about her work with quiet determination. Her hands, rough from digging in the earth but gentle in their movements, gathered sprigs of feverfew and chamomile, tucking them into the pocket of her worn apron. She had learned long ago that their fear was a price she must pay for her gift, though they would never understand it wasn't a curse at all. The memories of how it all began still haunted her dreams. 5 years ago, Elderbrook had been like any other village, suspicious of outsiders but warm to its own. Amara had been just another daughter of the community, known for her skill with herbs and her kind heart. Then came the fever that changed everything. It started with her sister, Elena. The sickness had swept through the village like wildfire, but when it caught Elena in its grip, something inside Amara had awakened. She remembered that night with perfect clarity, Elena's skin burning beneath her touch, the strange glow that had emanated from her own hands, and the first dove that had appeared at the window, its wings beating against the glass until she let it in. The fever had left Elena that night, flowing like a visible current of pain from her sister's body into Amara's own. For 3 days, Amara had burned with the illness she'd drawn from Elena, and when she finally recovered, the first streak of white had appeared in her hair, a permanent reminder of the price of healing. But Elena lived, and that should have been cause for celebration. Instead, it marked the beginning of Amara's isolation. More doves appeared with each passing day, and more people fell ill around the village. They didn't see that she was drawn to the sick, that the doves led her to those in need. They only saw the pattern where Amara went, sickness followed, and those strange white birds multiplied. The whispers grew louder when old widow Jensen's grandson fell ill shortly after Amara had passed their house. What they didn't know was how the doves had clustered at the boy's window, how their soft cooing had called to her in the night. They didn't see her slip into the house and draw the fever from his small body into her own, adding another white streak to her hair. They only saw that the boy recovered mysteriously while 3 other children in the village fell ill the next day. Now, as the morning mist began to clear, Amara sensed a change in her constant companions. The doves had grown restless, their movements more purposeful. They were leading her somewhere they always did when someone needed her most. She followed their guidance through the woods, her feet finding the path with practiced ease. The sound of stifled weeping led her to a small clearing. There, huddled against a tree, sat Sarah, one of the village women, clutching her daughter Maya to her chest. The child's face was flushed with fever, her breathing shallow and quick. "Please," Sarah whispered, her voice thick with tears and fear. "They say you're cursed, that you bring death. But I've watched you. I've watched the doves. My Maya, she's burning up, and the physician says there's nothing more he can do." Amara knelt beside them, her heart heavy with the weight of what was to come. A dove landed on her shoulder, its feathers glowing softly in the dim forest light. Another perched nearby, and another, until they formed a circle around the 3 figures in the clearing. "There will be a price," Amara said softly, her voice carrying the wisdom of one who had walked this path many times before. "Not in coin or goods, but in trust and understanding. Are you prepared for what that means?" Sarah looked up at her, tears streaming down her face. "They say you're death," she whispered, "but right now, you're our only hope for life." As Amara reached out to touch Maya's forehead, the doves drew closer, their wings creating a curtain of white around them. In the distance, a church bell tolled, marking the beginning of another day in Elderbrook and another chapter in the story of the woman they called cursed, though they had yet to understand the true nature of her power or the sacrifice that came with every life she saved. The healing began, and with it, another white strand appeared in Amara's hair, another dove joined her eternal flock, and another secret keeper was added to the growing number of those who knew the truth about the curse woman of Elderbrook. Maya's fever broke just as dawn painted the sky in shades of amber and rose. Sarah watched in wonder as her daughter's eyes fluttered open, clear and bright for the first time in days. But across the room, Amara lay curled on a wooden chair, her body racked with the illness she had drawn from the child. Another white streak bloomed in her hair like frost spreading across a window pane. The doves that had witnessed the healing now perched on the windowsills and rafters of Amara's cottage, their eyes reflecting something ancient and knowing. Sarah noticed how they moved in perfect synchronization, how their soft cooing seemed almost like a lullaby meant to soothe Amara's pain. "Why," Sarah whispered, cradling her recovered daughter, "why do you bear this burden?" Amara's voice came weak but steady, carrying the weight of years of untold truth. "Because someone must, because every life saved is worth the price." As the morning wore on, Amara's fever gradually subsided, though the new streak of white in her hair remained a permanent marker of the night's work. She sat up slowly, accepting a cup of tea from Sarah, and began to share the story she had never fully told anyone before. The doves, she began, reaching out to stroke the nearest bird's feathers, they're not harbingers of death as people believe. They're guides, guardians of a sort. Each one represents a life touched by healing, a testament to the balance between giving and receiving. She spoke of the great plague that had swept through Elderbrook 5 years ago, when death walked the streets like a shadow at noon. Her sister Elena had been among the first to fall ill, and it was then that Amara's gift had manifested. "I dream of that night," still Amara continued, her eyes distant with memory. "Elena was burning with fever, delirious with pain. I sat beside her bed, helpless, praying to any god who would listen. That's when I saw the first dove. It appeared at the window, glowing like moonlight given form. When I let it in, it flew straight to Elena and then to me. And suddenly I could see the sickness, really see it like dark threads woven through her body." Sarah listened, spellbound, as Amara described how she had instinctively reached out, both with her hands and with something deeper, something that lived in her soul. The sickness had flowed from Elena into her own body like water seeking its level, and with it came understanding this was her purpose, her gift, though it would come at a terrible cost. "Each healing takes a piece of me," Amara explained, unconsciously touching the white strands in her hair. "The fever, the pain, the weakness, I experience it all, and something else remains, a sort of echo. I carry a shadow of every illness I've ever drawn from another's body. Some days, when the weather turns or when I'm particularly tired, I can feel them all at once." As if to demonstrate the truth of her words, she was interrupted by a fit of coughing that left her gasping. The doves stirred restlessly, their wings creating soft currents of air in the small room. Sarah noticed how some of them seemed to glow faintly, while others appeared more solid, more present. The doves. Amara continued once she had caught her breath, "They appear with each healing. I used to think they were simply markers of the gift, but now I understand there's something more. They're witnesses, perhaps, or guardians of the balance. They lead me to those who need healing most desperately. Those whose time isn't yet meant to end." But as Maya grew stronger throughout the day, word spread through the village of her miraculous recovery, and with it came the inevitable whispers of darkness and curses. 3 more children fell ill before sunset, their parents casting suspicious glances at Amara's cottage. "It's her doing," they muttered in the marketplace. "She steals the health of our children to feed her dark powers. For every one she saves, 3 more fall ill. She's cursed us all." The accusations grew louder when Thomas, the baker's son, developed the same fever that had nearly claimed Maya. Then the carpenter's twins fell ill, their small bodies burning with unnatural heat. The village began to simmer with fear and anger, like a pot left too long over the fire. Amara felt each new illness like a physical blow. the doves growing more agitated with each passing hour. They led her to each sick child, but now she had to move in secret, slipping through shadows to reach those in need. The cost was mounting. 3 more white streaks appeared in her hair, and her body ached with the accumulated burden of illness. Sarah watched this unfold with growing concern, seeing how each healing drained more life from the woman who had saved her daughter. "You can't go on like this," she protested one evening, as Amara struggled to stand after healing yet another child. "They'll destroy you if they discover what you're doing." "They fear what they don't understand," Amara replied, her voice hoarse with exhaustion. "Fear turns to anger, anger to hatred. It's the way of things. But I cannot stop, not while there are those who need me." The breaking point came when Lily, the village elder's daughter, fell ill with a fever that burned hotter than any before. Elder Marcus had been the loudest voice against Amara, calling for her exile from the village. Now his daughter lay dying, and the doves clustered around his house like snow in summer. Amara felt the pull of the child's illness like a hook in her heart. The doves were more insistent than she had ever seen them, their wings beating against her windows, their calls urgent and demanding. But to help now would mean exposing herself, revealing her gift to those who would call it a curse. As night fell, word spread that Lily's fever had worsened. The physician had given up hope, and Elder Marcus's wife could be heard weeping from their house in the village center. The doves grew more frantic, and Amara felt the familiar surge of her gift responding to desperate need. Sarah found her preparing to leave the cottage, her face set with grim determination. "They'll kill you if they catch you," she warned. Perhaps Amara agreed, watching as the doves gathered around her like a cloak of living light. "But I can't let an innocent child die to protect myself. Each dove you see represents a choice to help despite the cost, to heal despite the consequences. I made that choice the night I saved Elena, and I make it again every time the doves guide me to someone in need." She stepped out into the gathering darkness, the doves forming a glowing trail before her. Behind her, Sarah watched with a mixture of admiration and fear, understanding at last that what the village called a curse was something far more powerful and far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. As Amara made her way toward the elder's house, more doves appeared, their wings catching the moonlight like shards of stars. They were no longer just witnesses to her gift, they were proof of something greater than fear, stronger than suspicion. Each one represented a life saved, a moment when love triumphed over fear, when healing overcame hatred. The village held its breath in the darkness, unaware that its greatest test was about to begin, a test not of magic or curses, but of understanding and acceptance. And in the center of it all walked Amara, her hair now more white than black, each streak a testament to the truth that the greatest power isn't in cursing the darkness, but in bringing light to those who need it most. Thunder rolled across the sky like angry drums as Amara approached the elder's house. The dove's wings glowed against the storm-dark clouds, creating an ethereal path through the rain. Behind her, she could hear the growing voices of the villagers, their torches flickering like angry fireflies in the downpour. "The curse woman comes for another child," someone shouted, and the crowd's murmur turned to a roar. Elder Marcus burst from his house, his face twisted with grief and rage. "Stay away from my daughter," which he bellowed, but his voice cracked with desperation. Through the window, the sound of his wife's weeping mingled with Lily's fevered moans. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the scene in harsh white light. Amara, her hair now more white than black, standing before the house with dozens of glowing doves circling above her, the angry villagers with their torches and farming tools, and Sarah, pushing through the crowd to stand between them. Stop! Sarah's voice cut through the storm. "You don't understand what she is, what she does." "We understand well enough," Elder Marcus spat. "Wherever she goes, sickness follows. Look at our children. Look at my Lily." "No," Sarah countered, her voice gaining strength. "Look at my Maya, who lives because of her. Look at your own nephew, Thomas, who recovered last week. Look at all the children who survived when others said they were beyond hope." The crowd hesitated, and in that moment of silence, a heart-wrenching cry came from inside the house. Lily's fever had reached its crisis point. "Please," Amara spoke softly, yet her voice carried to every ear. "Let me help her. Then judge me as you will." Something in her tone, perhaps its complete lack of fear or its deep well of compassion, made Elder Marcus step aside. As Amara entered the house, the doves followed, their light filling the small room with a gentle radiance. Lily lay on her bed, her small form twisted in fever-racked agony. Her mother, Agnes, looked up with tear-stained eyes, hope and fear warring on her face. "If you harm her," Elder Marcus began. "Watch," Amara interrupted gently. "Watch and understand." She placed her hands on Lily's burning forehead, and the doves began to glow brighter. As the villagers crowded around the windows and door, they saw something extraordinary. Threads of sickness, visible as dark shadows, began flowing from Lily's body into Amara's. With each passing moment, Lily's breathing eased while Amara's became more labored. The witnesses gasped as another streak of white appeared in Amara's hair, spreading like frost across dark water. Her face grew pale, then flushed with fever, but she didn't break contact until the last shadow of illness had passed from Lily to herself. As Amara stumbled back, barely conscious, a new dove appeared, but this one was different. For a brief moment, it bore the clear image of Lily's face in its glowing form before taking its place among the others. The dove, Sarah explained into the stunned silence, "They're not omens of death. They're memories of life, spirits of all those she's saved. Each one represents a time she chose to take another's suffering upon herself." "But the sickness that follows her," someone in the crowd protested. "She doesn't bring the sickness," Sarah continued. "The doves lead her to those who are already ill, those she can help. Every white strand in her hair is a fever she's taken, a life she's saved. She bears the echoes of every illness she's ever drawn from another's body." As if to confirm her words, Amara collapsed to her knees, her body shaking with the fever she'd taken from Lily. The doves descended, their light surrounding her like a protective embrace. "Look at her," Sarah demanded. "Really look. Count the white strands in her hair, each one a life saved. Count the doves, each one a testament to her sacrifice. You called her cursed, but her only curse is caring too much to turn away from those in need." Lily stirred on her bed, her fever gone, her breathing easy. She opened her eyes and smiled at her astonished parents. "The dove lady," she whispered, "she glows like an angel." Elder Marcus knelt beside Amara, his face transformed by understanding and shame. "All this time," he whispered, "you bore our children's suffering in silence. Why didn't you tell us?" Through her fever, Amara managed a weak smile. "Would you have believed me? Sometimes truth must be shown, not told." The storm outside began to ease, and in its wake, something shifted in Elderbrook. The villagers watched as their children who had been healed came forward, each one pointing to a different dove, recognizing something of themselves in its light. "They stay with me," Amara explained softly, "to guide me to others in need. Each one remembers what it means to be saved, to be given a second chance. They remind me that every sacrifice is worth the cost." As dawn broke over Elderbrook, it illuminated a transformed village. Where once stood a mob bent on violence, now gathered a community beginning to understand the true nature of curses and blessings. The doves circled overhead, their light a reminder that sometimes what we fear most is what we understand least. And in the years that followed, when people spoke of the curse woman of Elderbrook, they did so with reverence rather than fear. They told stories of white doves that glowed like starlight, of a woman whose hair turned white with every life she saved, and of the profound truth that the greatest magic of all lies not in avoiding suffering, but in choosing to bear it for others. Amara remained in her cottage at the edge of the village, but she was no longer alone. The doves still followed her, their numbers growing with each life touched by her gift, each sacrifice freely given. And if you asked the people of Elderbrook about curses now, they would tell you that sometimes what appears to be a curse is really a blessing in disguise. You just have to be willing to look past your fear to see the light within. Spring came early to Elderbrook the following year, bringing with it changes as profound as the turning of seasons. Where Amara's cottage once stood in isolation, a healing garden now flourished, tended by many hands. The villagers had worked together through the winter to expand her small herb garden into a proper healing grounds, with beds of medicinal plants stretching in neat rows and a new greenhouse gleaming with fresh-cut pine and clean glass. The doves, ever present, seemed to multiply with each passing month, their soft light a familiar comfort rather than a source of fear. Children no longer ran from them but watched in wonder as they guided Amara to those in need. Some of the younger ones even claimed they could see faces in the doves glow, glimpses of those whose lives had been touched by healing. On this particular morning, Amara stood in the center of her garden, her hair now completely white but her spirit stronger than ever. Around her gathered a small group of students, young people from Elderbrook and neighboring villages who had shown signs of the healing gift. Elder Marcus's daughter, Lily, now recovered and blooming with health, sat among them, her eyes bright with purpose. The gift of healing. Amara explained to her students, her voice gentle but firm, is not about power but about choice. Each time we choose to help another, we choose to bear a portion of their burden. This is not a curse, as some once believed, but the purest form of blessing, the ability to transform suffering through sacrifice. A dove landed on her outstretched hand, its light pulsing gently. These companions, she continued, remind us that every life we touch leaves its mark, just as every healing leaves its trace in our own bodies. They are not harbingers of death, but testimonies of life, each one a story of hope chosen over fear, of understanding chosen over judgment. Sarah, who had become one of Amara's closest friends and supporters, watched from nearby as she tended to the herb beds. Her daughter Maya, now healthy and strong, helped sort dried herbs for the village's winter stores. The scene was peaceful, purposeful, a far cry from the fear and suspicion that had once surrounded the curse woman of Elderbrook. As twilight approached, the doves began their evening dance, their light creating patterns against the darkening sky. The villagers had come to see this daily ritual not as an omen, but as a reminder of their community's transformation. Each glowing bird represented not just a life saved, but a lesson learned about the nature of true sacrifice and the power of understanding. Remember, Amara told her students as they prepared to depart, what appears to be a curse to some may be the greatest blessing to others. Our gift is not in avoiding the pain of others, but in choosing to share it, to transform it, and in doing so to bring light to the darkness. The doves circled overhead, their light merging with the first stars of evening, as Elderbrook settled into the peace of knowing that sometimes the most powerful magic lies not in the absence of suffering, but in the choice to bear it together, to heal it together, and to emerge stronger in the shared light of understanding.